In this short video, we're going to talk about axiology. So again, for those who have not watched the first video or need a quick reminder, what is axiology? Well, axiology is one of the four branches of philosophy of science that were presented in the introductory video. And axiology refers to the values that we hold as scientists, researchers, or indeed applied practitioners. Science can tell us what is, but it doesn't necessarily tell us what should or ought to be. We cannot derive one from the other. Ultimately, science can't tell us what we should do. Even in the case of doing science itself, at some point we have to reflect and consider what things we consider to be important, what values do we hold. This quote from Alvin Weinberg sums this up nicely. Whether it's conducted at the level of the individual scientist who decides to do this rather than that, or at the level of the research director who sets a whole laboratory on this course or that, or at the level of the Bureau of the Budget, which directs a whole nation's science policy one way or the other, in every instance, science involves questions of value. Is it more important or more valuable or somehow better to do this rather than that, to support high-energy physics rather than nuclear physics, or oceanography rather than space science? At every stage, we have to make some decisions in science that don't rely on ontological or epistemological value, but instead rely on other values, non-epistemic values as they're referred to. Let's just go through a few sets of ideas that have been presented with respect to values in science. So first we're going to touch on Merton's norms and counter-norms of science. So Merton posited or presented four pairs of norms and counter-norms in science. And these were communality versus secrecy. So the norms being things that scientists should hold as being valuable, and counter-norms being things that are anti-science or against science. So communality, where common ownership of scientific goods is present, including the findings, materials and data. Openness and transparency being an important value. Whereas with secrecy, scientists do not share their scientific goods. They're closed and opaque. Universalism versus particularism. As a good norm, as a value, scientific validity is evaluated on its own merit independently of the socio-political status or personal attributes of the participants. And as a counter-norm, particularism, scientific validity being assessed based on the reputation and status of individuals or research groups. Disinterestedness versus self-interestedness. With disinterestedness as a value or a norm, it's motivation by knowledge and discovery to contribute to a common scientific enterprise, whereas self-interestedness is motivated by individual benefits, where the science is treated as a competition among scientists to gain these benefits. And lastly, organised skepticism versus organised dogmatism. As a scientific norm, organised skepticism says that claims in science, even one's own work, are exposed to critical appraisal by the community before being accepted into the canon. And organised dogmatism suggests that scientists should instead invest their career in promoting their own claims, findings, theories and innovations without self-critique or self or community critique. Now these are quite famous, but more recently a series of values or virtues have been presented by Barry Schwartz, and we'll go through those briefly now. So Barry Schwartz details the following 6 values or virtues. A love of truth. So scientists and scholars and students need to love the truth to be good at what they do. They need to love the truth because discovering it is the point of their efforts and because knowing the truth matters. Fair-mindedness. Fair-mindedness enables us to face the limits of what we know. It encourages us to own up to mistakes, and it enables us to acknowledge uncongenial truths about the world. Perseverance. Scientists, scholars and students need the intellectual virtue of perseverance, since little that is worth knowing or doing comes easily. Courage. Scientists, scholars and students need intellectual courage too. They need it to stand up for what they believe is true, sometimes in the face of mass disagreement from others, including people in authority like their professors or journal editors. Perspective taking and empathy. Scientists, scholars and students need to be able to take the perspective of others and empathise. This is especially true in an age in which almost all substantial work is in fact collaborative. And wisdom. Finally, scholars, scientists and students need the virtue that Aristotle called practical wisdom. Any of the intellectual virtues mentioned can be carried to an extreme, and wisdom is what enables us to find the balance. Now, Barry Schwartz wrote these with respect to science for scientists, but also as values that students should consider during the pursuit of their degree as well. And he notes that each of these requires practice. They don't just come naturally. You don't just get to accept them and then be good at achieving them. You need to practice the love of truth. You need to practice being fair-minded. You need to practice persevering, trying to know and understand things. You need to practice courage to be able to stand up for what you do believe is true. But indeed also be able to take perspective and provide and generate empathy to others as well. And finally, recognise through wisdom and the practice of these other virtues when you have taken them to an extreme and when you have found the right balance for them.